back to Behind the Doors, where we uncover the amazing mysteries of our Earth's dark past. Today is January 27th, 1970, the 25th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. With me today is a young survivor of the Holocaust who was able to pass as Aryan. Today we will hear the uncovered story of Nessa Zilsel.
Thanks for having me today.
So, today is the 25th anniversary of the liberation of the people of Auschwitz. For our set today, we wanted to speak to the children who had both experienced the camps and the pain of hiding and being separated from family. We are very thankful to have you here today and ready to share your story.
Yes, I feel that I'm finally ready to share my story with the world. I was 10 when it all started. I come from a noble Jewish family from the little town of Nur in Poland. There wasn't very many people that lived there, but we were happy. My family had the largest house on the street, seeing as my father was the rabbi.
What was the initial reaction of the people in your town upon hearing about the concentration camps?
The people of my village were skeptical. Now that I think back to it, we were probably all in denial. We are such a small town and no one thought the Germans would waste time on our small community. Can you blame us? Imagine hearing that your people are getting murdered by the Germans. Would you believe it?
No, I don't believe I would. It was a hard thing for many to believe at the time. It is definitely understandable why the Jews wouldn't either. What happened once the Germans did arrive in your town?
They told us that we had 24 hours to pack up our stuff. For the next day, they would kick us out. We were all confused on why and wondering if the concentration camps were real and if that's where we were going.
Before the Germans had arrived, had any part of your village ever discussed sending the children off on the kinder transport?
No, see, our village only had about 760 people and we were all very close, so no one wanted anyone to be separated. Our town was so small, we didn't think that we could get kinder transport. Plus, we still weren't exactly sure what was happening.
Back to the Germans taking your town, how did you end up getting sent away?
One of our maids heard tell of what was going on and offered us a way of escape. My parents insisted that me, my older sister, and my younger brother get out while we can. They, of course, couldn't go. Someone would notice if they were gone. That was the last time I would ever see them.
Where did you and your siblings head to? Leaving the ghetto had to have been tricky, especially considering there were Gestapo everywhere. How did you and your siblings trek across the countryside and avoid people finding you?
We had to sneak out during the night when most people were asleep. Our maid led us down the back where there were no guards. The trek across the countryside was long, but we were able to take the train since my siblings and I had blonde hair and blue eyes, rare for Jews. But the trek was worth it. Before we made it on the train, common hiding spots during our trek were barns, cellars, and even cemeteries. The city we were traveling to was Le Chambon-sur-Lignon, France, a town where Jews were safe and put in foster homes.
Now, there were many organizations who helped you, I suppose, and it would be too hard to recall their names. However, how long was it before you were with a foster family after your arrival at Le Chambon-sur-Lignon?
I was probably there for about 2.5 months. My siblings got adopted about 2 weeks before me. My sister begged for them to adopt all 3 of us, but they only wanted one child, and she was only able to convince them to take the baby with her.
Before you were set with your foster family, how long did it take to get false identity papers, and what were some of the things that you can remember that were on it?
The agency that I was at was only for Jewish children trying to blend in. They gave me a paper that said that I was a distant cousin of the family.
And what was the name of your foster family? Did they have any children, or were they adopting you since they didn't have the ability to?
No, they had other children. They thought it would be a good idea to adopt another kid, though. Their names were James and Emily Picard. At first, I was happy there. I had good food, a warm bed, and friends. After my first month there, my father found out I was Jewish. He caught me praying when I thought everyone was asleep. Things started to go downhill from there. The father, he started beating me if I did any little thing wrong or bad. He made me do all the chores and stopped treating me like a part of the family. My friends at school had no idea about this because I wasn't allowed to have any friends over. I'm glad because going to school and my friends' houses were my only escape. No one else knew I was Jewish, not even my foster siblings or their mother, although they might have suspected something.
And how did your foster mother treat you? Was she as bad as the father or more kind?
She was kind to me. She never beat me. And at night she would apologize for her husband's actions, although she never stood up to him. She was scared that he would beat her too.
Did your foster family take you to church or attempt to convert you to Christianity?
Yes, they had me baptized at their church, but I only went when they made me and never fully converted.
What was it like attending school with other children again? Jewish children were removed from schools in most countries, so it must have been hard to keep up.
There were no other Jewish children in my school that I knew of at the time. I was constantly scared that someone would find out my secret. Almost all the children in my school were recruited to join the Hitler Youth. They kept trying to get me to join, but I always found excuses.
Les Chambon-sur-Lignon was one of the most well-known cities for keeping Jews safe, so there must have been more Jewish children there. Did you ever find any of them or meet any of them after the war and share stories?
After the war, my people were still unsure of who to trust, but I did find out that my best friend from school was also a Jew. We have never lost contact and are still the best of friends.
Now, a lot of families were often moved who were harboring Jews. Les Chambon-sur-Lignon was a pretty safe town for Jews, but was your foster family ever forced to move to a different location for your safety?
No, they weren't. My foster family was very good at keeping the secret. As I said before, only my foster father knew about my origins. I had heard of some of our neighbors moving away for mysterious reasons. I now assume that they were harboring a Jew.
Of course, that would make sense that they were hiding Jews. Everything at the time was very mysterious, and there was a lot of trust issues between neighbors, friends, and even family. Earlier, we spoke of how you were separated from your family and your other siblings. How did this impact you during your time in hiding? And what was the hardest part of being separated?
The hardest part of being separated was the fear of never seeing them again. What if they were killed? What if they forgot about me? What if my brother grew up to hate Jews? I was constantly worried.
In the end, you found out your parents had passed. How did you take the news at the time? You were a bit older than 10 at that point, but how did you handle it?
I was heartbroken. I didn't think about them much, but it still hurt to know that I would never see them again. We couldn't even have a proper funeral for them since we didn't have their bodies.
Were you ever reunited with your siblings? If so, did you find out before your siblings about your parents or after?
About a year after the war ended, I was finally reunited with my siblings. I was so relieved that nothing horrible had happened to them. At the time, I was about 14. My sister was now 19, and my brother was 6. We were so happy to be reunited again.
Did your brother have any memory of your parents or even you? Was he aware of being Jewish or was he converted by Christianity?
He did not remember our parents or my face. My sister told him about us, but he didn't recognize me when we met. Eventually, we told him of his Jewish origins, but he remained Christian. However, we do celebrate Jewish and Christian holidays together.
It's nice that you guys are still celebrating the holidays together. To wrap up the interview, I have a few more questions. Did you or your siblings owe any money to the foster families that helped you? It was a common thing for some families to do, but since you were children, I would assume they were more lenient.
They made me get a job to help pay for the extra food and other stuff, but they never threatened to kick me out.
We are thankful a person like you would not be kicked out. So now, we are at the end of your journey. How did you end up in America? So are your siblings here as well, or did they stay in France and Poland?
We all figured that it wasn't safe for us to stay in Europe because there were still people who hated us, so we all moved here.
What was it like moving to America? Do you feel you've been safe and happy here?
Moving to America was scary because there were so many people on the boat, and America is a new country. But once we got here, it was worth it. It was rough at first, and we all stayed together, but slowly we got used to it. It was nice working for ourselves for once and not someone else. We quickly settled into a routine. My brother and I went to school while my sister worked, and I had a job in the summer.
It's wonderful that you and your family got to start over in America and build a life for yourselves. You went through a lot of terrible hardships, and so did many other Jews, but what is important is that you made it out alive, and the evil that took so many lives is obliterated. I am so glad that you could come and speak with us today, Nessa. It was a pleasure having you, and I hope that everyone watching learned a lot about the Holocaust. Stay tuned for another interview with Alexis Hirsch, a young woman who braved the Holocaust.
Welcome back to Behind the Doors, where we uncover the amazing mysteries of our Earth's dark past. Today is January 27th, 1970, the 25th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. Here with me is a survivor of a concentration camp, Alexis Hirsch.
Thank you for having me today, Holly. Ever since I came to America, I've always been interested in your show.
I'm glad. Today we are going to talk about your experience in the concentration camps. Very few children survived the camps. So, what was your life like before it all started?
Before the camps, I was 14 years old. I lived in Sighet, which is in part of northern Romania. My family and I were neither poor nor rich in our town. During the war, there was only ever talk about the possibility of German invasion, but hardly anyone believed it. People were very optimistic that the war would be over and we would not have to leave our town, even after an interesting character by the name of Moshe the Beetle told us that the war was coming. No one ever believed it.
Isn't that the town where famous Holocaust writer Elie Wiesel grew up? Did you know him?
Not personally. I knew of him and his family, but not much about who he was. He was around the same age that I was, and I recall him in some of my classes during school. My parents would always tease that I would someday end up with the rabbi's son, but I was never interested in that kind of thing.
What was your family like?
I had 2 older brothers and a very young little sister. She was about 5 years old before the Holocaust and turned 6 after we moved into the ghettos. My 2 older brothers often worked out of the town. One was actually a traveling seller who returned a few days after the town was sent to Birkenau. His name was Abraham, while my other brother was Christopher, who was pursuing Mr. Wiesel for a spot as the next rabbi. My younger sister was just getting ready to attend school and was named Charlotte. My parents worked solid jobs with my mother running a boutique, and my father keeping the peace as somewhat of a police officer in our town.
Once the Germans arrived, you were moved into the ghettos, correct? What was life like in there? Did you try to escape? Did anyone die?
Some people died of starvations. Others even came down with the common cold and were left behind. I never tried to escape, but plenty did, and some were shot for it. People were very skeptical in the ghetto, and we believed that we were just being sent off to hard labor. No one expected the death and misfortune to fall on us. It was all very unexpected.
After your time in the ghettos, you were put on a train. How long was the train ride from the ghettos to Auschwitz?
It took a bit over 3 days for us to reach Auschwitz. People were frightened, and in a train car behind us, there were many odd screams. A woman was yelling about fire, and everyone was scared. Luckily, I wasn't in that car, but my family and I, as well as the rest of us in our car, still had to hear her screams. They were frightening and depressing. The worst part is, in the end, her screams of fire were true. We were all to be burned, and I recall thinking at the time that she must have been a prophet trying to show us the way, but we were too dumb to listen.
That sounds horrible. What was the selection like? Did you have to lie about your age? What happened to your family?
Selection was an interesting process. I was separated from my father and my brother Christopher. My younger sister, my mother, and I, however, were taking a different direction. They split us by genders, and we were forced to walk by a group of men. They inspected us and asked for our age. I lied that I was 18 in hopes that this would maybe save me. I felt selfish at the time, but it would be the one thing that saved my life. After that, we were forced to walk by flaming pits, and we all got to watch as lifeless bodies burned. It was absolutely terrifying, and I don't know what to think. I didn't know what to think. After that, we were forced to shower naked and take a rest in a muddy room.
Did you ever find out what happened to the rest of your family?
Eventually, yes, I found out what happened to most of them. My mother was cremated within the first week at Auschwitz. My brother Christopher made it through multiple camps until he was liberated. And my father, he died at Buna during a selection in which he failed to have the exemplary skills they needed for hard labor. As for my younger sister, she died during the first week as well. It was quite depressing. I almost blame myself for her death.
What happened to her?
You see, it was a few days before anyone was killed. People were disappearing a few at a time, and we were being put to work. Since my mother was the one always taking care of the family, I picked up a few health skills. The capos watching over our unit noticed that I could do this, and I became an assistant in the health facility at Auschwitz. During this time, I often was helping in the women and children's unit. On one of my first days, they were removing children from their mothers, and I watched as my little sister was torn from my mother's arms and carried to the crematory. That was the last time I ever saw my sister.
I'm so sorry that you had to watch your sister be carried away like that. What kind of labor were you forced to do besides working in the infirmary? What did others do?
Before they realized my potential, I was forced to do some hard labor. Before many children were cremated, they were put into hard labor for about a week. You had to be older than 10, though, to fall into this category. We did tons of hard labor.
So, after they saw what you could do, did they have you work in the infirmary?
For the most part, yes. I worked and helped out with little things such as bringing food and giving moral support to the patients. At Auschwitz, it was often a short stay in the infirmary before they decided to have you cremated.
Sounds like a horrible experience in the infirmary. Do you know if any of the patients there were getting experiments performed on them?
I knew some were experimented on by Dr. Mengele. I never met the man, but I saw him walk through the infirmary countless times, and he was quite a scary man.
There are many things said about Dr. Mengele. Did you make any friends or become close to anyone?
Yes, I met 2 young girls before I moved to the work camp in Allendorf, Germany. Their names were Genevieve and Giselle. I became good friends with them. They were very sweet and only 8 years old. I took care of them and treated them like my sisters, but I never realized they were getting more sick until it was too late. It turned out that Dr. Mengele had been experimenting with them, and one day they just never came back to the infirmary. I never found out what happened to them, but obvious assumptions can be made considering what Dr. Mengele specialized in.
Yes, it can only be assumed what terrible things they were put through. After all this, how long were you at Auschwitz?
I was in Auschwitz for about 2 months. Half of the time, I was working in the infirmary until they made cuts and agreed that saving Jews from illnesses was a waste of time. From that point on, I went through about a month of torture and imprisonment at Auschwitz before I was selected to go to a work camp in Allendorf, Germany.
What happened there?
We were forced to make rockets and bombs and fill them with liquid chemicals. Unlike normal scientists, we had no protection from the chemicals, which led to discoloration of the skin, lips, and hair.
Did anyone die because of this?
Yes, plenty died. The chemicals were extremely dangerous for people to handle, and it was without protection. Eventually, though, at the end of March 1945, our group was sent on a death march to Buchenwald. It was then when women began to form groups and plan escape.
Did any of the plans work?
Yes. In fact, I escaped in a group where we hid in a barn while everyone marched past. There was quite a few of us. We had to stay and hide in the hay bales of the barn for about a day and a half before everyone passed. We knew we would have been shot if we had dared leave as people marched. We stayed in the barn for a while before some U.S. soldiers found us and liberated us. They sent us to a displaced persons camp in Germany, and I was there for about 8 months before my brothers got in contact with me.
Where did you go after you contacted your brothers?
After that, it was the real decision. We either went back and tried to make a life in Sighet, or we tried to get a passport to America. At the time, my brother Abraham, who avoided the Holocaust by selling in countries without German rule, had quite a bit of money to his name. Due to his small but helpful amount of wealth, we used it to get us passports and tickets on the next boat to America. We planned on starting a life in New York City, but the lifestyle never really came. We ended up in a small town on the border of Lake Superior in Michigan.
How has life been since then?
It's been just fine. Abraham is keeping up with his selling and trading. He's often trading around the Midwest to state fairs and big festivals to sell his goods. Christopher went to college and decided he would pursue an old dream of being a police officer. He told me it was kind of like a thing to remember Dad. I, on the other hand, tried to attend college, but didn't have too much luck. I wasn't accepted into the college for being a woman and an immigrant. However, I was able to start my own business in Michigan. I sold little crafts I made. It's been really nice making a small income and doing what I enjoy. I also run a youth group in the town, which always brings me great joy to see young children.
For our final question, I'd like to ask you something a little more personal. After your experience in the concentration camps, what do you believe every human deserves?
I believe that every human deserves an opportunity to live out a happy and successful life filled with love. If one cannot have that, then they will not enjoy their life. You have to find something you are interested in and pursue it. It may not be the ideal situation, but as long as you are happy, you'll succeed. I believe everyone deserves a chance at that, and I'm extremely saddened that so many had the option taken away from them at such young ages in their life.
It sounds like through all the hardships, you and your family made it past the struggles. You all survived a lot and managed to make it past, and managed to make it to America and make a life for yourselves. Maybe you can't escape the trauma and terrors of the Holocaust, but it is in the past now, and you have been able to start anew with your family and take time to remember those who passed. I'm so glad you could be with us today and tell us your story of your experiences in the Holocaust. It was a very intriguing and scary story that will help hopefully move everyone that is watching. It was a pleasure having you. Next time we will be interviewing a German woman who harbored Jews in her home named Isabella Johnson. Good day, everyone.